This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, a continuity of business solution for industries that struggle with traditional banking. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. The Rob McNealy program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. Today, we're talking to Naomi Brockwell of Naomi Brockwell TV. She is a very passionate and successful YouTuber in the tech space. She's been talking about cryptocurrencies since, I think, from what I read, like 2013, probably before I even heard of Bitcoin. So, Naomi, I'd like to welcome you to the show. How are you today?
I'm feeling great. It's wonderful to be here.
Fantastic. So you were on the East Coast, but I think you've relocated fairly recently?
Yeah, I mean, I move around a tremendous amount. It's one of the joys of working in crypto and reporting on things. I go to wherever the exciting things are happening. So yeah, not based in New York anymore.
You got to come out to Salt Lake City. There's a lot of crypto stuff happening here too. We're becoming a little tech hub for crypto now.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, Overstock.com, Medici, our project. Let's actually.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so I personally live like 5 miles from the Overstock headquarters where all that kind of hub is, and a lot of our meetups I actually have there. So spend a lot of time with there. But, but people don't really realize that like Salt Lake is like this kind of tech hub, kind of in between like, Boulder and Silicon Valley. And I think it's interesting. I've kind of wrestled with this. Why are there, a lot of the tech hubs tend to be in more kind of left-leaning political cities like, San Francisco and Austin and things like that. But Salt Lake is the only tech hub in the country that is a little more right-leaning.
Interesting.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of, people that either might be a little more conservative or libertarian. They come to Salt Lake, and we have, presence of all of the major, tech companies are here too. In fact, Adobe's got a big headquarters. They're just expanding right now, just south of here a little bit. So it's kind of interesting.
I see a lot of people actually leaving America altogether. Regulation has not been kind to the crypto industry. So I unless they change their ways, I'm not sure that we're going to see many tech hubs related to blockchain staying in the US in the next few years. It's getting pretty tough.
I agree. And someone just asked me, a gentleman starting a European crypto exchange, we were just literally talking about this. What do you think of, he's really bearish on the concept of decentralized projects altogether. He thinks that because of the way the EU and the American regulations are starting to pan out, that they want to have a centralized party that they can hold accountable. So he thinks that, things like Bitcoin and stuff are going to fail ultimately. And I'm like, I don't know. I think that's certainly a regulatory risk, but I think going forward on that, what's going to determine that is going to be the health of fiat currencies to begin with. If the dollar fails, I could see how our government and some other governments that are dependent on that might want to create a barrier for people to off-ramp to fiats or alternatives. But what do you think about that?
I mean, they can ban Bitcoin, and I think it would be devastating to Bitcoin if they did that, but it wouldn't kill it. I mean, you see Bitcoin in its earliest days being used for nefarious activities that was themselves banned. So, I don't think a government ban on anything has been successful in the history of government bans. Prohibition has never worked. So I think that it would be devastating. I think you would see a lot of the major institutional players dropping out at that stage, but I definitely wouldn't kill it. And I think that if the US dollar, as you said, does fail, then people would have a choice of staying between a legal failed currency or, actually have a chance at holding their value. I'm just glad that there are options out there for people at the moment. And I'm glad that Bitcoin exists, because I do think that a crash is coming, and things are going to get tricky. So I think that, the talk about like centralized crypto things, I think they're the ones that will fail or will ultimately be co-opted, because there is a central leverage point. There is a place, they can unplug the servers, they can storm the business, they can throw the CEO in jail. As long as Bitcoin doesn't have any of those things, they're things that the government can't do. You look at Libra, what's happening at the moment with all of the hearings. I think that that Libra can definitely be co-opted the same way that Facebook itself has, and the government frequently uses social media sites and uses the data from that and leverages their power in order to coerce companies to hand over certain data on users. And I think that it won't change with Libra. If they allow Libra to go forward, it will be a Libra that is very much utilized by the government as a surveillance tool, and that's just the reality of it.
Well, I absolutely agree with you on that. And I think that's been one of my, hellscape versions of what I think Libra could pan out to be. I look at it, I also think it could be possibly an Amazon killer in some respects. Because if you look at, people on Facebook, and I'm just as guilty as anybody else. I mean, people put out so much information, they just kind of spew it out to Facebook that it's an enormous amount of profiling data. And the one thing that Amazon which already themselves have a tremendous amount of data on it. If they could have this, if Amazon, for instance, could have the same amount of data on their users as Facebook does, it would be very, very game changing. And I think Libra, once they combine that financial data, combined with the personal data they already have, I think it's going to be an Orwellian hellscape.
Well, I think that Amazon will probably come out with their own coin. You're going to have all these major corporations competing, and it won't just be Libra that's doing this. You're going to have all sorts of consortiums being arranged between very powerful companies. But I'm actually excited about that future, because right now we have a government monopoly on the money supply, and we've had not only lack of innovation and this incredibly archaic and cumbersome system to navigate, but it's also a system that routinely opens people up to identity theft, because we're obliged to hand over information, and we have to trust, we're mandated to trust third parties to protect that information, and they don't. Our information is always being hacked and stolen. JP Morgan, every other week has a hack, and our identity gets leaked out there. All of our information gets leaked. So I'm looking forward to seeing a system where that information isn't necessary for the system to operate. I mean, currently, in order for two people who don't know each other to send money, you have to have all these checks and balances, and it's an enormous cost in organizing those checks to verify identity, and you are who you say you are, and the other person is who they say they are. So now that we have a system that has a decentralized trust base, I think that that's a game changer, and is going to completely change our understanding of what finance could be. So I'm excited about the perception that people have about money changing. I'm excited about them no longer intrinsically linking government to the creation of money. Always, people think, well, that's the role of government. That's something they should always do. And it's just not. Throughout history, you've had private alternatives to money all the time. Money was private before governments came in and co-opted it. So I'm excited about going back to a time where people's perceptions go back to that. We don't just think it's the government's role. We see private individuals can create their own money. Corporations can create their own money. The marketplace will ultimately decide which monies are the best, and people will gravitate towards the products that suit them best and fulfill their needs. I think that's going to be a better society for everyone.
I agree with you. And, I hear lots of, especially in the maxis, and the different crypto projects that really are coming out against Libra. And other than the Orwellian hellscape piece about, privacy.
Oh yeah. I mean, that is terrifying. I wouldn't trust them with my financial data.
But one of the things that I think, there's a couple things that I really like about the idea. And I'm moving forward with the concept that they will work, they will launch, and they will be a dominant crypto. Now, I think that hopefully the things that I look at is, are they going to create the on-ramp, off-ramp infrastructure? How can I benefit? How, as a project and as other people that are into crypto, how can we leverage what they're going to do? And the three things that I like, potentially, I'm trying to look at the bright side, right? Avoid the hellscape vision in the back. But one, I think they're going to change public perception about cryptos.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
Because everybody's like, oh, well, because everybody I know everybody out that I talk to about Bitcoin or anybody crypto, they've heard of Bitcoin. Everybody I know has heard of Bitcoin. I haven't found anybody recently that hasn't heard about Bitcoin, the word Bitcoin. That's like a name brand now. But they usually associate it with something negative or, scammy or slimy or things like that. So I think Libra could change that, and I'm hoping for that. I'm hoping they're going to create on and off ramps to fiat. But the most important thing I would like to see Libra do and the Libra Partner Foundation Group, is to go through and change how the IRS taxes and views crypto taxation. And if they can elect to start looking at cryptos as foreign currencies and not as property. I believe, and personally, I believe right now, and no one's hearing about this, but I believe that the IRS rules are probably the biggest impediment to retailer mass adoption right now.
Absolutely, I agree.
And no one's complaining about that. They complain about the SEC, right? But I think they're not complaining about the IRS because no one's really using crypto as far as I see for, lots of buying and selling of actual goods and services.
Well, I think that that's because of the IRS ruling. I mean, I'm not going to buy a coffee with Bitcoin anymore if I have to track the changes in value there and keep all of that data. I mean, it's just a nightmare to sort through. So I definitely agree with you there. I think that that's a huge impediment, and I wish people would talk about that more. And I agree that Facebook, they have tremendous amount of lobbying power. They have tremendous amount of resources. They could potentially be in a position to change those ruling. If they want their currency to succeed, they want people to use it, they're either going to have to provide all of these crazy tools and explain to people like what these capital gains things mean for the consumer. And, that education frontier is like a nightmare. But, they either have to do that or try to petition them to change the rulings. Maybe it's like, purchases under $600 aren't subject to this, or it's something like that. I definitely do see them having the potential to make some headway there. That's exciting.
And that's what I'm excited about. I mean, I just imagine in my mind the typical Instagram influencer trying to learn about capital gains and them having to educate these people on the selfie culture. And I'm like, that's just not going to work. They got to fix the rule. It ain't going to work. And unfortunately, the IRS just sent out, I guess, 10,000 notices today to, people. And I'm like, it's a, first rule of tax evasion, don't brag about it on social media.
God.
Yeah, there's so many of these, early crypto activists. I call them activists. They're like, screw, I'm into crypto because I don't want to pay taxes. And I'm like, yeah, and you're posting that on Facebook.
Yeah.
And you downloaded a wallet and you have a Coinbase account, and you downloaded a wallet from iOS, store, and it's like, So one other thing I want to talk about a little bit, you've been, covering the Craig Wright stuff pretty heavily. And it seems to me, and I'm not part of the Bitcoin world, I'm in my own little world with our own little projects and stuff. And can you give us kind of a synopsis on what's going on in that world with the Craig Wright stuff? Is he Satoshi?
Oh God. Well, he likes to tell people that he is, and it doesn't like to provide much proof to back that up. I mean, I think it's very, 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 very unlikely that he is Satoshi Nakamoto. And if he were, he'd have a very easy time proving it, because he could simply sign a message with his private key and with something that was already associated with Satoshi's identity, but he has chosen not to do that. And his response has been like, I refuse to jump through these hoops. And on the other side of things, he is willing to jump through the hoops of going to court and charging people, suing people for libel when they say that he's not Satoshi Nakamoto. And he says explicitly, well, I'll prove it in court because I think that's a superior way to do it. And it's like, really? It's gonna rely on the perception of jury or the perception of a judge rather than giving us the incontrovertible proof that we would need, which is super easy to do if you were Satoshi Nakamoto. So it's just been a circus, to be honest. What's been going on? There's been this recent court case with Kleiman versus Craig Wright, and the idea is that Craig says, oh, well, I was part of this team, and David Kleiman, who's since deceased, was one of my partners there. So then the Kleiman estate went after him and sued him and said, listen, if you are Satoshi, then we say that David Kleiman should have had a bunch of Bitcoin and we think that you stole it. So if you are Satoshi, we want half of whatever you have because you say that Dave Kleiman is the other half of that. So he's been fighting that in court. The judge has not been happy. There's one stage where he threw some evidence around and the judge said, if you do that again, I will put you in handcuffs in the spot.
Wow.
And so it's just kind of, there's this ongoing saga. It's exhausting, to be honest, to watching all of this stuff, but we'll have to see what happens there. For me, it's just entertainment value. There's not going to be anything really substantive that comes out of all this, but it is kind of enjoyable to watch just from entertainment level.
So as someone, I've only been in crypto a couple of years, and, so I was not like an early part of the Bitcoin community, and I don't have any, I don't have a dog in that fight. I got some Bitcoin of my own for investment purposes and stuff, but, you know, but when I see like it seems like every time there seems to be a fundamental breakdown in conflict resolution within the Bitcoin community, you get these huge forks, and you got BCH, and then you got BSV. I mean, long term, how does that affect the community long term for Bitcoin when they keep seeming to fracture like that? Do
I
you
think
think
that's a great part of it. I'd say that is a feature, not a bug. I think that in the United States, when you have people in the political system that disagree with each other, it's like mob rule. It's 51% gets to dictate what the other 49% do. And I think that that's crazy. I would love to see secessionist movements where people are like, listen, Texas is really different from New York. Let's just go our separate ways. Why am I dictating to you? If you don't want guns around, then what should I dictate to you what you can and can't have around? On the other side of things, if they want to have all of these government programs and Texas doesn't want to pay the taxes for that, New York should have the ability to have those programs if they want them. I think it's crazy that these two are forced under this big blanket where they're all, it's mandated that they abide by the same rules. So the same thing in the crypto community. I love the fact that it's easy to fracture. If you don't agree, then you can go off and do your own thing, and the market will dictate which one they gravitate towards, which one they prefer. Obviously, there are downsides to that. It's not a perfect system. You're splitting the community, which splits the hash rate, which makes things hash power, sorry, which makes things less secure. But it also allows the market to work and to determine what people want. There are different ecosystems that are evolving in crypto at the moment, where different cultures around different coins, and that's really interesting to watch, because people have this false notion, I think, that there has to be one currency that wins out, and that notion is tied to history and the technology that was available through history. So previously, when you had physical things that signified money, when you had gold and silver and seashells and salt and whatever else, it was crazy to expect you to carry around all of those things at once. You couldn't have a bag that had copper and gold and silver, you would choose which one was most likely to be accepted down the future, and that's the most likely one that you will walk around with. So that's why one currency tended to win out. Now, if there's no physical limitation and you can have a wallet with all of these currencies, and it's absolutely no burden on you to carry around multiple ones, then I don't see that same pressure being put on the market to choose just one. And what we're seeing at the moment is, as I mentioned, different cultures kind of gravitating around different coins. If you look at the people who like Litecoin, the people who like Bitcoin, the people who like Bitcoin Cash, the people who like Monero, they're different types of communities that are supporting those things. You have Monacoin. It's a cryptocurrency, which means that it transcends boundaries and borders, goes internationally really easily, and yet it's only really popular in Japan. Stuff like that is really interesting to think about. But I think that, I like seeing those communities. I like seeing competition there. You are also seeing at the moment some coins are joining forces. They have distinct projects, but maybe they're pooling their resources now, and you are starting to see the market shift, and different bad projects are failing, good ones are sticking around. Some bad ones are sticking around too, but we'll see what happens in the future.
Indeed.
But I'm enjoying watching the competition out there, and as people determine what works and what doesn't.
Well, I think a couple things. You just articulated states' rights better than I think most Americans could grasp that. When our country was originally founded, the idea was that you would have 50 independent countries that kind of work together on the big stuff, like for common defense. That was the whole point of having the Constitution in the first place.
And we got the interstate commerce rule, and suddenly everything was a federal domain, and the states lost all their rights.
Well, I think, when you think about it if you decentralize 50 states, you can do exactly what you say. If one state wants to be, more of a communist state or a socialist state, they have the freedom to have a laboratory to practice and see if they can make it work without the risk of taking down the rest of the 49. And I think that would be a much preferred system because you got built-in redundancies. The problem is now we have a winner take all. If California fails economically, which it certainly looks like it's going to fail before some of the other states are going to fail, the rest of the country's got to pick up those pieces and deal with that, that fallout. And I think that's we've missed the boat on this. And then I think I really like your opinion about your statement about the cryptocurrencies. And in this whole Highlander, there can be only one thing. And you see that with some of the strong some of the maxis that are kind of like that. But to me, I've always looked at if there was only one major crypto for the planet, right? That inherently is a centralized problem. If you think of currencies as a competing market, whether they're fiat or crypto or what have you, is that at least every country has its own fiat currencies typically. And now you have these corporate coins, and now you have these community decentralized coins. To me, from a redundancy standpoint, I'd rather see hundreds of cryptocurrencies hot swapping and atomic swapping between one another, because you get so much more redundancy. If you have one major crypto for the planet, all the bad actors, and we're talking state actors that have serious firepower when it comes to computing, whether it be D-Wave quantum computers or what have you, they're going to try to throw their weight at taking it down, and that would disrupt the whole planet. Whereas it's a lot harder to take 3 or 4 or 500 or 1,000 separate decentralized networks down at once. It's not going to happen.
Well, I think that's a great point, and I agree with the underlying idea of that. It just it gets harder when you're talking about hash power, and that's what's used to secure a network. So I think that ultimately you are going to see people gravitate towards certain coins. You've seen sort of the smaller coins that get 51% attack. That it happens quite frequently, actually. So it is fairly easy to do things like that. And the more hash power you have, the harder it is to facilitate those kinds of attacks. But at the same time, you haven't seen these coins that have been 51% attack necessarily disappear. They managed to survive and continue. So I think that has been interesting. We've kind of been seeing how this will play out, and we're starting to get new information about cryptocurrency and what it takes to have like a robust ecosystem. So I think that you're right. I'd like to see more redundancy, and that's why there are different ecosystems that I support. And on my channel, I try to be agnostic, and a lot of people don't like that. Some people do like that, but especially if you're a maximalist from any particular camp, they don't like that I'm talking about other projects that they see as being competition for them and inherently hurting their market share, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that we should have seen already, like, there are different coins for different use cases. An individual is going to be using different things depending on what they want to be doing. And people need to recognize that and say, okay, well, you're good for that use case and you're not so good for that use case, and we can go our separate ways, and people can have both and use both. And I think we're yet to see the space mature and start to look at that, especially when you have some coins that share a namesake. They've been a fork of something else, and you see them kind of battling over that kind of trademark, or that branding, I should say. I'd like to see them just kind of recognize each other and say, listen, I don't like what you're doing. I'm not going to use your thing, but go keep doing what you're doing, because we've got a different use case over here. And maybe an individual can look at that and say, well, actually, I find both of them useful for different things, and they might choose to use them. I'd like to see the ecosystem evolve and get to that stage already.
Well, I think it's a really good point. And to me, it's like, obviously 51 techs are, a problem with proof of work, POW kind of projects. And then there's innovation coming with DPoS and proof of stake and things like that. And I think, again, more redundancy. It'd be nice if some of the maximalists out there were a little more welcoming to the concept, is at least you're being agnostic about, that. I always say cryptocurrency's got the benefit of, helping people do commerce, that have all the benefits of fiat, right? Everybody can recognize it. But the things that we should be focusing on is what the technology allows digital cryptos to do that what fiat can't do. And that's what you I think we're alluding to, is that why isn't there a crypto for the travel industry put together by a community in that community, right? Same thing like what we're doing with the firearms industry and things like that. So it's like, there's no reason that there shouldn't be the nightclub crypto, or like Bravo Coin's another project I've heard of where they're just Yelp and they kind of pay people to write reviews. And to me, that's the benefit of crypto, is the technology allows you to do so much more than just what, you know, normal fiat can do. And I think we're just really early on. And I think that there's going to be a lot more of these strong community or single use case kind of cryptos out there that actually are going to come from really strong communities because they really are passionate about their one use case or their one industry.
And I think that what we're seeing is people, I mean, they see coins coming around for different niche purposes and they dislike it because they know that Bitcoin could probably serve that purpose. And I think they're missing the point, you know, why do we need Patreon when we have PayPal, right? It's the same thing. I could do a recurring transaction on PayPal easily, send it to a person. And so there's really nothing that Patreon is providing that is useful to me that I can't already get elsewhere. But the fact is, it's like a niche use case. It's specific for that. The user interface is for that. The community around it is for recurring purchases on Patreon. So Patreon has proven that, you know, you can have PayPal and Patreon at the same time. People will use both for different things. And I think you're right. Like, I mean, a lot of the coins that are coming around for niches, they're probably going to be shit coins and they're probably going to die off. And, you know, we'll just see that happening. But you're also going to see a lot of coins that people thought were shit coins persist because they're actually useful to the consumer and people aren't really recognizing that. Like I use a lot of social media sites out there where I monetize my content and it's not money that I'd necessarily keep around, you know, I transfer it into something else, but as a means of facilitating exposure of my content and income from my content, it's wonderful. And, you know, Bitcoin hasn't been able to provide the same benefit to me. So there are different platforms out there that I use that, you know, I find very useful. And I think that the ecosystem will evolve and develop. And I like what Scott Stornetta says about this. So he was one of the inventors of the early blockchain, and he cited, you know, half of the citations of the white paper of his work. And he talks about it and says, you know, we've learned how to decentralize trust, and we're probably going to end up with all these things happening under the hood. We may end up with a system where we don't even know which currency we're paying with. You know, we have them just interoperating underneath the hood, and these wallets that maybe have algorithms that choose for us what the best coin to spend at any given time is. You know, all these things could happen and we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but he definitely sees an ecosystem where there are lots of competing things going on. So that's does seem very interesting.
Yeah, and I think the redundancy in that, you know, these multi-coin wallets, like Trust Wallet, which was, you know, recently, you know, procured by Binance, and then they opened it up and they're like, we're going to be like a universal wallet. And, you know, our original token project, we were in Trust a year and a half ago, and from the beginning. And so it's like, I think more of those enabling technologies, I think, you know, the interfaces with cryptos need to change. They need to be just as easy as Venmo for people to adopt them, regardless
have you checked
of
out Shapeshift's new platform?
I haven't been on it yet.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Their aim is to do just that, to be a better user interface, to be super easy. I think Eric Voorhees was talking about how his granddad was on there, and I'm like, what? Apparently he logs on and he like checks his balance and all that. So I love that the ecosystem is now evolving and easier platforms to use are coming around, and people are thinking more about user interface and about the consumer experience, and not just about the tech.
So where do you see crypto is going to be in the next 5 years? If you had to like dust off your crystal ball, what do you think the biggest thing you're going to see happen in crypto in the next 5 years?
I think we're going to see a giant battle with government, and it's going to get harder and harder, and people have to realize that it's coming. That's what Ron Paul said as well a couple of years ago. He said, like, you're crazy if you think the government's just going to lie down and accept this. They're not. They're going to fight this, and they're going to fight this hard. And we're seeing that start with Libra. They're really starting to come down. You mentioned, you know, 10,000 letters getting sent out by the IRS. That's going to keep going. You have SEC starting to crack down more and more. You have Treasury starting to put sanctions on different addresses. You have some, you know, people like Brad Sherman who's saying that Bitcoin itself should be made illegal. And then you have other jurisdictions all around the world where governments like in India are saying that, you know, you use cryptocurrency, you should be thrown in jail. So I think that like it's going to get scary. But this is a battle for financial autonomy, and it's a battle worth fighting, and we're going to see it escalate, and that's what the next few years is going to see. I think that Libra, I think that a lot of the battleground is going to be where Libra is. That's going to really, I think that just really escalated the battle that we're gonna see. Because it is a centralized company that governments can control, and they're going to try to, and we'll have to see how much Facebook fights back there. I mean, they're seeming to fight a little bit from what I've seen. Like, it seems like they want Libra and like the on-ramps and off-ramps to be the ones that are regulated, whereas Libra network, they want it to be barely open and unregulated. That seems to be their point, where they're talking about, like, what if we wanted to impose sanctions? You know, will you not notarize things in the blockchain? And he was like, oh, well, you know, the sanctions that will be dealt with on the wallet side, it would depend on the jurisdiction where the user is. Like, you know, they're kind of talking about it as if the Libra network should not be the thing that gets regulated. So that's interesting. I don't believe that they'll ever become decentralized like they're saying they will, but it is interesting that they're fighting back a little bit. So we'll just have to see whether they fight back a little or a lot, and what happens to the rest of the crypto community as well. Like, that's what my crystal ball is telling me at the moment. I think it's going to get harder, not easier. But at the same time, I mean, it's a global currency, and there will be jurisdictions around the world that will continue to support this tech and allow this tech, and so people may start voting with their feet a lot more. But I think we're going to see a complete shift in financial systems around the world over the next 10 years. The next 5 years is going to be big legal battles.
You know, I can't disagree with your crystal ball. Naomi, where can people find out about you?
So my YouTube is Naomi Brockwell TV, and that's on YouTube. Obviously, you can also find my videos on BitChute and Library.io and Memo.cash and Bitbacker.io, Float app, and all these things. You know, anywhere that there's a social media platform, on Steemit as well, you'll be able to find me there. If I'm not on a platform and you think it's a good platform I should check out, then let me know, because I love the redundancy as well. I don't necessarily want to just build a community in one place, because there are a lot of great sites out there, and I think that we should be supporting the decentralized social media platforms, decentralized video platforms, because that's how we take, you know, if we don't like places like YouTube censoring videos, we don't like them demonetizing people, same with Facebook, etc. Start supporting the sites that don't do those things. So I try to keep my videos on a variety of different platforms to help support the ecosystem. So you can find me everywhere. I try. The show is ubiquitous.
Thank you so much, Naomi. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you so much for chatting with me. It's been great.
You have a good day. Thank you for listening to the Rob McNealy program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcnealy.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.